on today's podcast for the Hockey IQ project here that we have going, the Hockey IQ podcast, we have Connor Cadaret, really bright young man. Really enjoyed having him on the episode. It's really cool to see what he's doing from a player-driven perspective. I know that I do a few things similar to him, so it's always great to see what you're doing is working elsewhere and other people are contaminating the sport with a player-first attitude. So I'm excited for this. I don't know about Dan here, but Dan probably really enjoyed that as well. A lot of good things that came from that. And the one thing that stood out to me other than the players, what he's trying to do is just build up the habits, whether it be how you're living, creating the character, and then the on-ice habits that come with that discipline that you build. So, Dan, what'd you take away from all of that?
Yeah, I really enjoyed our conversation. I thought he made a really good point about making sure that not just the players, but the coaches, everybody involved with this, builds memories, really just enjoys their time. It's easy to get caught up in the rankings and the minutia and all that. That is, the worst of minor hockey. But I thought he did a really good job to express how, at the end of the day, if you're not having a good time out there, then you're really missing the point. And I think that's a simple thing, but it's also a really profoundly important thing.
Yeah, and I love how he's just praising others. He's really being that servant leader and showing off all the people that are doing such great things. So I love that. And even with Akron, it became very apparent very quickly that we need to do more to build the character, not just the hockey player itself. So I'm excited for this episode. Dan, any last words before we get to it?
No, let's get to it.
All right, here we go. Connor, welcome to the podcast. Connor, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Greg, how are you?
Excellent. We got Dan here as well, my co-host, and probably my better half at this point.
What's up, fellas?
Just enjoying the night. I know you just got a big win with your stove, making some money.
Yeah, man. Anytime you can come up net positive is a win for the program. So happy about that.
Absolutely love that. So today's episode, we got Connor. How's the best way to pronounce this? Is it Cadaret?
Yeah, you nailed it. That's rare. Playing hockey growing up, when they announce when you go on the ice, I've heard everything. I've heard Cadet, Carrot, Cadaret.
Cadaret,
from
French.
Montreal, but yeah, exactly. I'm not French. It's Connor Cadaret.
Oh, beautiful. I'll take that. There's a win for me. So we got Dan a win. Greg's got a win. We need to get Connor a win here next. So we'll do that. I have the same problems. My name, everyone pronounces it Revik. It's no, it's Revac. Just RE, like you're doing re-projection, whatever.
You went with re-projection there?
Dude, I'm a financial advisor. You know this. I deal with some insurance policies here and there. That's what I'm going with. I literally did a re-projection of an enforced policy today. So deal with it.
I can hear people turning off this podcast.
Anyways, moving on to real reason we're all here. Let's talk some hockey. So curious about your coaching journey so far. Maybe what have been some of your big epiphanies, things you've learned, things you want to share.
Sure. So I'm 27 years old. I grew up in Stouffville, Ontario, Canada up here. I didn't play an incredibly high level of hockey growing up. I played single A here, but I was lucky enough to have a lot of success playing. Some great coaches along the way. I was definitely a pain as a player. I was the guy always with suggestions on things we could do better. Probably didn't present those in the right way as a player. Now that I'm a coach, I realize the way that I like to be presented things from players. But yeah, like I said, we had a lot of success in town. So after I graduated university, I just kind of got into coaching just to give back. So I started as an assistant coach here in Stouffville at the AA level, so U13 and U14. Definitely a big learning experience. I learned a lot of what it takes to be a successful team and kind of the why behind a lot of things. I think we're all similar ages. When we played, it wasn't quite to the level it is now of explaining the why behind things. So I think that might have been some of my frustration as a player. But that's probably epiphany number one is explaining the why. And I've spoken to a lot of coaches over the last little while, and it's almost gotten to the point where you every decision you make, I put a lot of thought into it and kind of put myself in the player's shoes and how it's going to affect everyone on the team. So when you're presenting to the team, how are they going to receive it? What questions are they going to ask? Because like any successful team now, you want to be promoting communication. You want them to be asking questions. You want them to be suggesting things. So if you're promoting that, you better have the answers. So every time I present to the team, or even if it's just I'm going to go into the room before practice and talk to someone, those are always calculated decisions on what I'm going to say and how I'm going to say it, and how it's going to affect everyone on the team. So I would say explaining the why is a massive thing. It just makes your life so much easier, and it's difficult sometimes. But if you're genuine and you're really explaining and you show that you care and it's for the benefit of the whole team, it's an easy thing to do. So I was assistant coach for 2 years. I became head coach the last 2 years, still at the AA level, U15 and U16. So going as a head coach, one of my main focuses really was making sure my team understood my reasoning behind all my decisions. So even if that was at the very micro level, in a game, for instance, if we're down a couple of goals early, and I'm not a big fan of waiting till the end to try and tie it up. If I want to try and swing the momentum of a game, and I'm going to play my first and second line for a couple shifts here, I'll go down to the third line. I'll get down to their level. I'll say, look, we're down a couple. We want to try and swing momentum here. I'm going to go with these guys for the next 6 minutes. Get ready because you're going again. But just explaining that even at that level, in game, it just takes work, but it keeps kids engaged, especially in minor hockey, because there's nothing worse than being benched and not knowing why. And another focus of mine was just making sure at that age that we were really holding ourselves accountable, and the players accountable, because there's a lot that goes in, especially with the parents. It's a lot of time and effort, so you want to make sure you're getting the most out of it. So my players signed a team player contract, just with little things. It helps with the camaraderie and just lay down some ground rules, know they're kind of part of something bigger than themselves. So that was one of my main things.
Can I stop you there real quick?
Yeah.
Without, you don't have to give away state secrets or whatever, but can you tell us like some of, the contents of what's on that contract?
Yeah, so a lot of them, very simple things, and I kind of drafted some of my ideas, and then we talked to the team, and they provided some of their ideas, but basically just like what to wear to the games. And again, it's not strict, just like something as simple as no ball caps. So you can wear toques in the winter, but no ball caps. Wearing your stuff in and out of the rink, I don't care what you wear when you get in the dressing room, but just little things that help. And then just things that kind of should be on every single contract, and it's kind of an unspoken thing, but just to see it in writing where it says no homophobia, no racism, no drugs or alcohol at the rink. I mean, they were pretty young, but just to see that in writing and have their signature on the bottom, it just shows that it's zero tolerance, and they all understood that if anything of that level happened, like you signed the contract, your parents saw it, there's going to be repercussions. But it wasn't anything crazy. It's just an idea to keep the team together and lay down some small ideas. I'd say epiphany number 2 would be to value character. And going into being a head coach, especially in minor hockey, youth hockey, there's a lot of rumors about players, whatever, parents, families, stay away from this family. I would say value character and form your own opinions. And we brought in some new players my first year. I did my own due diligence, sat down with families, and you learn that a lot of those stories aren't true, whether it's someone holding a grudge or something like that. But most coaches don't want to take on that project player, so to speak, the one that's going to be more work, probably because it's going to be more work. And a lot of youth coaches simply don't have the time or the passion or the drive. But the ones that do, it's important to take those on, because a lot of those players are just looking for someone to believe in them and to tell them that. And one thing, especially in youth hockey, is don't assume that the players know something or that they are reading off what you're saying. Tell them directly. Tell them to their face that you believe in them and you are putting them in this situation for them to be successful, because as we know when we were kids, some things go in one ear out the other. So just don't assume that they know that. Tell them that. Tell them that you care, and that goes a long way. I'd say the last thing that I've kind of learned on this journey here is to enjoy it. I know a lot of people, it's said for players, like after they're done playing junior hockey, it's, man, I wish I enjoyed my time a little bit more. There's too much pressure. It kind of flew by. I wish I was more present. But I think the same thing can go for coaches, because if you're not enjoying it, I just don't see the point. And it's a lot of work, but that's what makes it fun. And if you're passionate about it, that should be the fun part. I mean, me and my assistant coaches the last couple of years, we've had times where we're cracking each other up during a game on the bench, and the kids are looking back and they're seeing their coaches laughing and cracking jokes. And it's, whether it's a 3-2 game, 3-3, we're losing, winning, they see that and they're like, you know what, we're here playing a game, and it's fun. And for the most part, that goes a long way, more than any X's and O's.
I totally agree with that. I think that's like so contagious too, when, you know, the players can see that you're having fun and, you know, you're really just enjoying yourself. I think that's so huge. And I'm glad that you brought up like the players, making sure that they realize that this is supposed to be fun too. Cause I say that all the time to our kids, like, man, if you guys aren't having fun now, like, you're going to regret this one day, because this is about as good as it gets. Like, I still remember, I coach Bantam too. And, I remember like my Bantam coach was literally the person who, he was the officiant in our wedding. You know what I mean? Like, the memories that you'll have from like minor hockey are like whatever you make them. So if you're like not having a good time, not, you know, making like lifelong memories now, it's just going to be something that you'll look back on later. And
Yeah. And there's a reason why you ask a kid about his minor hockey career and he goes to the away tournaments or the bus rides or something like that. It's when you're together as a team. And yeah, I agree with what you said. It's not about, they're not going to remember looking back about that face-off play you called to tie the game up in some tournament semifinal. They're going to remember that time you set them down, gave them a hard truth, told them you believed in them, told them that you love them and care for them. And that's the relationships you want to build. And that's what goes further than the game, I think.
I love the fact that you talk about kind of building those relationships with the kid, because I think that's super important. You got to build a rapport with them and have them understand that you're there for their best interest and you want to see them succeed. But going even further back than that, I'm curious, how do you kind of go about getting players to ask more questions? I find that, especially like that Bantam, early high school type ages where they're starting to get up to like that U16 type hockey, they kind of struggle to ask questions because they've had that authority in their life for so long. Is there a certain way you get at that or continue to build that rapport so they have that comfort to ask questions?
Yeah, for sure.
Something I'm always thinking about.
Yeah, it takes a lot of work. And trust me, I've had probably every meeting we've had as a team, you ask a question and it's just crickets. But it starts small, and it starts not on the ice. It starts whenever you're with the team. Maybe you pick one or two kids that you kind of focus on that time, whether you're training, and you kind of get them to lead things, to run a stretch, to come up with a question to ask to the team. And I like in practice too, to kind of, your leader should do it anyways, but maybe pick a role player to kind of hold people accountable during practice. Get guys to be passing on the stick. Tell them if they're not. Tell them if they're taking a drill off. And you just build that comfortability of talking, not necessarily asking questions, but just empowering them to know that they do have a voice. And again, it's kind of comes from within them. So you need the culture in your team where your leaders are not just leading like a dictatorship. They're asking their fellow teammates what they think. And that kind of goes into, I think it was Ken Hitchcock kind of said one time, it's not necessarily the meeting that you have to worry about when you're presenting to your team. It's the meeting after the meeting. So it's when you leave the room, what are they talking about? So you want to make sure that your leaders know what your message is, and not only your leaders, just everyone, because if you're kind of on that kid, that one training session, you're in his ear and you're kind of giving him your messaging, your culture, after that one meeting, maybe it clicks and he remembers something you said in the summer and he says, look, like we did this in the summer, he said this, like this is why we're doing it. It's just, I think it's an all-encompassing thing. It's a 24/7 thing. You always have to be attentive and choose your words very carefully, how you present to the team. And again, that meeting after the meeting is important. Make sure your leaders know to reinforce your message, because if you leave and they're saying, screw this, we don't want to do that, let's do it our way, there is no point in having those meetings.
That's the most powerful person on the team. That's the most important person on the team, is the person who says the first words after you leave a room and starts that meeting after the meeting. I couldn't agree more. I mean, that's the person I focus on trying to develop most, because it's going to determine how your message gets received by the group. If that one person starts cracking off and rolling their eyes, then you're in for a long season. So
yeah, for sure.
Couldn't agree more. So continuing on here, what's kind of maybe your philosophy on not just the person, which we've talked a lot about and which I think is extremely important, but also on ice? How do you go around that development philosophy and process?
I think, I mean, I already touched on it. Character is huge with me. That's first. That bleeds into everything else. But as far as the on ice, I think skill is a massive buzzword now. It's such a vague term, but skill development is used so much. But I think, and kind of along the lines of what you guys are doing, I think hockey IQ is a skill. It can be developed. It's just a matter of explaining things. I think it was Patrick Stefan on the Hockey Think Tank podcast, not to pump another podcast, but I was listening to him and I liked his description kind of hockey IQ, of just kind of seeing it, understanding it, and then applying it in a game. It's the same as anything else. Some players are going to have a better understanding. They're going to be able to process faster. They're going to be able to apply it better, but it can be worked on. It's just a matter of taking it in, explaining to them their options, and then applying that in a game. And one thing that I like to kind of use as an example for developing hockey IQ is, especially with the youth levels, when you're learning to drive, that first time you come up to an intersection and you're turning left, there's a lot going on. So you don't know if you should creep out into the intersection, if it's turning yellow, another car's coming straight, someone's going right, there's someone crossing the street. You kind of are indecisive in the moment. I know I think I made a mistake my first turn out of the driving school. But after a while, if you drive now, think about the last time you turned left. You didn't even think about it. It just kind of processed subconsciously, this guy's going to go through. Oh, it's yellow. I got to go through now. No one's crossing the street. That's kind of what hockey IQ is. You build the habits and provide them with the options consistently, that it just turns to something subconscious where when they're in the situation on the ice, they know what to do. And I'd say another big thing for me in developing players is developing well-rounded players. One thing that really bothers me, especially at the higher levels, is seeing the kid that's just way better than everyone else, going up and down the ice, scoring goals at will, but he's not doing anything. He's not learning anything. So I like to put players in every situation, no matter what their skill level is. Now, at certain points, do you have a power play unit, penalty kill unit? Sure. But your team should understand what you're doing in those situations. And you should be putting players in all situations, giving them the chance to play at the end of a game. Because you don't know how many times as a team you're kind of defined by your role players. You see it in the playoffs all the time. You get some injuries, all of a sudden next man up, and that guy scores a big goal. And that no one sees that guy has been developed over the last X amount of months, and he's ready for that opportunity. So one piece of advice I'd give to youth coaches is sacrifice those 1 or 2 points you're going to lose by putting a quote unquote weaker player out at the end of the game, because you never know when he's going to have to step up in a bigger moment. And it's invaluable. And lastly, I'd say developing confidence is one of the biggest things. And a lot of these things aren't necessarily on ice things. Skating, shooting, passing, those are all pretty, skill again is a buzzword. Those things get developed all the time. One thing is confidence that doesn't quite get developed. Even the better players, you might not know, like they might just be good at it, but they don't really know. Again, don't really assume anything. If they do something good in practice, tell them. And a lot of times you hold those players a little more accountable because they're relied on, and you see something in them, but they might not know that. So if you're holding them accountable a little more than others, make sure they know that, and make sure it's because you're confident in their abilities, and you know they can get the job done. And always, always just jump at the ability and the opportunity to praise good things. Develop that confidence any way you can, because it's in the age of instant gratification of this generation. They want to know when they do something well. So tell them, and it's going to go to their head. It's going to go to their heart, and they can build that confidence, and that's just going to feed into everything else.
I love that.
Okay.
I agree with everything that you just said. Sorry, Greg, didn't mean to cut you off. I'm curious if you could give us an idea of like what a typical practice that you're running looks like, because I love what you're putting down. I just kind of want to hear more.
Sure. So in Stouffville here, we usually have either a 50-minute practice or an 80-minute practice. So I'd say mainly we have 50 minutes. Right off the bat, I dump the pucks on the ice no matter what. Give them time to fool around, give them time to have fun, skate around, shoot. One kid's always working on the Svechnikov behind the net. I've yet to see him pull it off, but
Next practice.
Let them. Yeah, that's what he always says. But let them do that. And then I kind of one big pet peeve I have in practices is all these kind of Instagram accounts where, and not to say Power Edge Pro necessarily, but these drills don't have to be complicated. Because personally, if we have a skill coach out and he's explaining this drill with all these passes and turns and stuff, I can't even do it. Like I stand off to the side because I can't jump into the drill because I don't understand it. So there's no way 14-year-olds are going to understand it. So I have a core amount of drills that I do. Every drill focuses on passing. Every drill focuses on communication. If you don't yell for the puck, you're not getting it. Almost every drill, if it's a continuous drill, you have to stop at the net after your shot. Even defensemen, just building those habits. So a lot of passing, a lot of flow at the start. And I think two areas that I really focus on for youth hockey, and it's the same at any level really. With the puck, I'd say passing, and even doing drills where they have to receive it on their backhand, where I've stood at center ice and have them skate up the wall and throw the pucks at them. They have to take it off their feet, take it off their shin pads, stuff like that, passing and angling without the puck. Almost all of my drills, whether it be one-on-ones, battles, neutral zone drills, they have an aspect of angling, because those happen all over the ice. And that's one thing I think at the youth level that's lacking. A lot of guys skate straight at people. Their gaps are bad. So forwards and D, we focus on angling a lot. But I think, again, my practices are high tempo. I like to jump into some drills. My assistant coaches do too. I know sometimes we go half gear and we'll just do the drills with them all practice. But high tempo, passing, angling, communication, and just always having those habits, stopping at the net. And again, to touch on kind of what I said before, you explained that every drill we're stopping at the net after your shot and you're staying for the tip. A kid doesn't do that and he skates to the corner after a drill and the guy next in line is yelling at him to get back to the net and get there for the tip. So that's just kind of builds into everything that I've kind of touched on, where you give your players the confidence to speak up, develop those habits, and kind of just watch it transfer into a game.
And that's the big thing, really. It's creating the habits, because I've got a team here that I'm doing some coaching with, and we're going to try to go to the Tier 2 U16 national tournament, and they have phenomenal skills. Like, this is one of the best youth teams I've ever seen in Cleveland, but the habits are just so shoddy. And I'm wondering what's going on their actual coaches. Like, they're doing such a great job of teaching skills, but the habits that add up and really like kill teams by 1,000 paper cuts just aren't there. It's all I drill in right now is just habits that lead into winning and getting them to really take that next step.
Yeah, and I'm lucky enough this coming season I'm going to be working with the U7 to U11 teams here in Stouffville. But one thing I'm going to focus on is those habits, because even the pathways the Hockey Canada lays out here for us, it's, again, that buzzword, skill development. But if they don't know how to apply those skills into a game, it's not much use. So you can, even at the younger levels, again, do those habits in practice. One thing I love to do in practice, if you lose a puck on a drill, you go get that puck. You don't just let it go and yell at someone in the corner to give you another pass and go shoot it. You lose it, you go get it. I don't care if it goes down to the other end, we'll wait for you. You go get it, and then the drill will continue. Just because those things transfer into a game. If you lose a puck in practice, you give up, you go into a game, you lose it, it's going to have that split-second effect where you don't go get it back and you don't stop on pucks. And I think you are what you value, and if you value those things in practice, you'll see it happen in a game.
Why do you think that successful teams are player-driven, and how do you develop that?
So ultimately, they're the ones that do the work. So they're the ones out there with the blood, sweat, and tears. And anyone who's played the game knows when it comes from someone you're out there battling with, when they say something, it just goes that extra mile. And I think the teams that always win, and this is kind of culture as well, they are the ones that are player driven. I've heard many stories where the coaches have just kind of left it up to the team to figure it out. Now that's a calculated decision. I don't know if I would do that at the youth levels, but everything you say, again, you want to make sure that how you're presenting it, you want to try and encourage them to speak up and give you their ideas. And you want to make it so they think they're really driving the bus. So how you present it, you kind of hint at things, get them to present the same ideas that you want to present. And then it feels like they're the ones really leading this thing. How do you develop that? It takes a long time. And again, it's a lot of hard work, and it's just always being present and attentive and knowing your room. So know the leaders, take in those players, get their feedback on what they think the team needs. Don't necessarily do everything they say, but use some of their suggestions, mold it your way. But then they see some of the things going into the systems and the strategy, and they say, hey, that's what we just talked about. And again, I think it was Ken Hitchcock that said, you teach everybody, but you coach your leaders. So your leaders are going to be the ones driving the bus. If that's the way you want your culture to be, you really coach them into delivering your message, and they're the ones driving the bus. They're the ones driving the culture and leading the team. One way, and again, it's hard to do this organically, but one thing that really, really brings a team together and brings players together is shared adversity. And that you can't just create those, but everyone knows in a hockey season you're going to run into adversity. As a coach, you should crave those moments, because that's when you can really, really put your finger down on your team and have them lead their way out of it. So hold your meeting, empower them to speak again. But really, really understand that those are the moments that create your team and create your culture. And not to brag about my team, but we had some adversity. And I mean, if 15-year-olds can call a players only meeting when we've had adversity, sit in there for an hour before practice, discuss what needs to be done. And like, we don't know what they said, but they had the confidence to do that, and they knew we would allow it. And sure enough, the next game, it just seemed like everyone was tighter. And those are the things that you really want. And those are the things as a coach you should crave. You really want those things to happen. Now, you can't call a players only meeting as a coach. But it's all the little things that you do building up to that. And you hope that your leaders are confident enough to do that. And I mean, I'm not sure what it was. I know next game we had a different win song after. That might have been the only thing they discussed. And even if it was, they felt like they had the confidence and the power to really drive their team, because it is their team. We kind of provide them with the building blocks and they go out and do it. So in the end of the day, it's always all about the players.
That's a lot harder said than done for, I would say, for most coaches. So it takes obviously a good self-awareness, and you have that, and you're well-spoken. But also, I think for a lot of coaches, they feel like they need to win, or they want to win, or they enjoy winning. And there's that ego. But how do you like crush? I mean, it sounds like you've done a great job. But how do you crush your own ego, or how do you go about helping your assistant coaches crush that ego, where it's all player driven and all about the players? Because I try to do the exact same thing.
Right. Well, I've actually, and I think I saw it behind Dan there, he's reading some Ryan Holiday books. I'm actually reading.
Huge Ryan Holiday guy.
Yeah. I would recommend that to any coach. It was actually Wes Wolf, the assistant coach of the Erie Otters in the OHL, that recommended him to me. But I just did read Ego is the Enemy, and it's, again, I think a lot of these things, coaches just don't do them because it's the harder path to take. It's easy to just show up at the rink and follow your ego and kind of go with the highs and lows, take the credit when it comes, take the criticism when it comes, but it's a lot more difficult to always be mindful of the situation you're in. And you see it in minor hockey all the time. You go ask a coach how your season's going. Most of the time they'll talk about some tournament where they pulled the goalie and they tied it up and went on to win. You rarely hear about the coach that talks about the player that he graduated last season to the next level, or the player that is still playing hockey because of the impact they had on them. So ultimately, if you're a coach, you should be selfless. And I know some aren't, but if you want to be a good coach, that should be number one. And you should always be making not only the players, but especially as a head coach, make everyone in the organization better than they came. So whether that's your assistant coaches, your game day operations, your players, your manager, your trainer, always jump at the opportunity to give them credit and just watch what happens when you do that. It's the same thing. You're the leader of the team. Your team will follow after you. I was watching a game this year in minor hockey, and the kids were probably no older than 8 or 9, and whatever, there might have been a bad call. The coach loses his stuff on the bench, starts yelling at the ref. You kind of see his kids looking at him like, what is this guy doing? I don't think they played well the rest of the game, but sure enough, something happens later in the game. The ref, I don't know if he made another bad call or whatever, but one of the kids on the team, who's 8 years old, is slamming his stick on the ice and mocking the ref. And it's just, he learned that from his coach. So you need to be really careful of what you're doing and know that your team will follow after you. So always jump at praising others, giving credit to others, because then your team will do the same thing. But it's hard as a coach, especially a head coach at the higher levels. You're kind of the focal point of the team, but just remember that they're the ones out there doing it. So I mean, ultimately, you can have the best strategy in the world. If they aren't going to listen to you and you're putting yourself above the team, they're going to do the same thing. And come some big moment, they're going to step out of the way of a shot instead of blocking it, and you're going to lose the game. And one small thing is that kind of is along the same lines. I kind of wrote a little article for Jack Hand, who was an assistant coach with the Maple Leafs and just left actually, but it was kind of an article about a New Zealand All Blacks coach, so the legendary rugby team, and he was kind of sitting down with his captain one day, and the captain just said, like, why do you come into the room before the game and like give us a pump up speech? And he's like, well, I don't know, like I thought maybe just to give you guys some tips kind of before you go out and kind of pump you up. And the captain said, well, is it for you or is it for us? And I never really thought about it that way until I read that. But like, as a coach, are you going into the room before to kind of pump yourself up and to make yourself feel like you've done all you can? But like, if you are, again, you want to be a player-driven team, you want to have that culture, the days leading up to the game, the hours leading up to the game, those conversations should already be being had in the dressing room between your leaders, between your players. You don't necessarily need to go in and pump up your team. And trust me, it's, as a coach, sometimes you think that's going to make all the difference. You get that extra little 1% with some little quote or some whatever you say. But is that really benefiting the team? So I think as far as ego goes, everything that you do, I would really focus on, is this for the strict benefit of the team or is this for my benefit? Because you're not there for yourself, you're there for the team.
That's awesome. And I really enjoyed that article. I'll be honest, I had never really considered that either. It's one of those things, and you brought this up earlier on the conversation too, like so much of coaching, or at least how it used to be, is just like self-perpetuating. I did it this way, so I'm going to teach it this way. And I think it's really important that we as coaches reflect on that. Why do we go into the room before the game and say something? Well, it's because every hockey game I've ever played, a coach came into the room before and said something. But that doesn't necessarily mean that, it's effective or it's the way that it should be. So that's something that I'm going to take a look at this year is, whether that maybe there's some sort of like hybrid where like you give a different player an opportunity to speak in front of the team before games or something. But I think you're right. It's one of these like rituals that kind of exist because it's always existed. But that article that you co-wrote with Jack, and we're big fans of Jack, that I thought that drove home a really interesting point.
And I agree with that as well. I barely go into the locker room after games, even if it's a win. It's more of like a good job, boys, and done. I don't think I've ever done anything more than a few minutes. The only time I've ever really gone into a locker room is when we need to address something culturally and habits, something along those lines. Otherwise, it's all on the players, and you're handing it over to them. Maybe I'll go in, put in a few reminders to them that, hey, we want to do X, Y, and Z. But other than that, it's all up on them. And then I've got my 5 elements that I like in a performance. And if they're doing those, we're taking care of business, doing the best that we can. Doesn't matter. And talk is cheap. So again, I agree with what you're saying there. You got to be a role model. Those players are observing you constantly. So what can you provide them without speaking that provides them the opportunity to learn and become a better person, and therefore become a better player from that? So I really enjoy that aspect of it. I think that's totally underrated. We actually at Akron, I've got what we call Life U. It's a program we do for off the ice stuff. So it covers like personal finances and things like that. But we also talk about character and some leadership capabilities as well. And how do you handle that? So I love college club hockey because I think it's the greatest learning opportunity anyone's ever given you. You literally get to lead your peers. So I think that's cool. And how you get that opportunity for players, literally write it down that, yes, I'm going to abide by this, hold themselves accountable in practice, and then at games, just hand it over to him. That's awesome.
Yeah. And I mean, speaking to your team after the game, I would be very careful about what you say too, because that's a time where you can let your ego get the best of you, let your emotions get the best of you, and oftentimes your eyes kind of deceive you in the game. I don't know how many times you've kind of watched the video after. I know I have, and you kind of take away completely different things. So I would keep the message, even if you go in, short and sweet, and especially if it's like a big win, big loss, probably best to stay out of there and kind of cool down and reassess later on.
Call that the 24-hour rule. Let's take 24 hours, then we'll talk about it, especially if there's any kind of problems or issues that come up. That's always a smart move. So you're coming in with a cool head. So all about that.
For sure.
All right, Connor, I got one last one, and this might be a dud. I have no idea where this is going to go, but I'm curious. You're from Stouffville. Do you have any Jeff Merrick stories?
I don't have any Jeff Merrick stories other than I did play hockey growing up with Robbie Acton and Elise Acton, who are Keith Acton's kids. Keith coached the Maple Leafs for, I think, close to 10 years. And he's good friends with Jeff. So I've met Jeff through there. And one thing, I've met him once or twice in person briefly. But one thing about him that's kind of I've always seen online and through anyone that's kind of interacted with him is he's very genuine, and he's very open, and he's very vulnerable, and he'll talk about his success and what led him there, and he'll be the first one to congratulate you on your success. So what I'm going to be an assistant coach with the Stouffville Spirit in town here next season, which is the junior A team, and he reached out once that got announced and congratulated me. And again, I wouldn't say I'm friends with him, but we've met briefly, and he's very passionate about Stouffville. And like I said, every story I hear about him, and he's a very different thinker. So he if you listen to the 31 Thoughts podcast or any time he's on TV or thinking, he kind of reminds me of Ron McLean in the way he can find different avenues in anything. And I find that really interesting, and that kind of only happens because he's so passionate about it, and he's kind of reminds me of myself, where you can tell he's always thinking about hockey and what he can do. But no, not necessarily any Jeff Merrick stories other than the fact that he's from Stouffville, so he must be a good guy.
Well said.
All right. So we really appreciate you having come on the podcast. So we allow everyone to have their 2 minutes of fame. So I will give you a full 120 seconds to plug anything, thank anyone, talk about anything you want, starting now.
Sure. So, I mean, with all that I've said about being player driven, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the team I've coached for the last 4 seasons. So it was the 2004 born AA Stouffville Clippers. We were through our ups and downs, but this past season, before COVID halted everything, in the playoffs, all those little things that we've been working on and things we've been building towards, they all kind of came through. And different players stepped up at different times. Things were running like clockwork. We were really playing well, and more importantly, they were really enjoying themselves. And we were actually going into the provincial finals when the season got canceled. So that was a bummer, but I did kind of write another little article about my team, and when that happened, the kind of what I've been working towards the last 4 years was showing by some of the players actually reached out to me. So that night that the season got canceled. So the fact that my players are reaching out to their coach, seeing how I am, they're reaching out to each other. That just really proved that kind of what we had been doing was working. And that goes down to my staff, my assistant coaches, Denver Gray, Paulo Cimello, Todd Barclay, and my brother Chris, and our manager Ellen Peterman. And they get as much or more credit as me because it's a full collective effort. And all the players that I've coached, Thanks for listening. And I mean, they've kind of helped develop that passion again for hockey, and I will forever be grateful to them.
Wonderful. That was excellent. Well, we really enjoyed having you on. Wish you the best of luck this year with your new squad. Looks like you get the older kids, right?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, they'll be 16 to 20-year-olds. So
On to a new challenge. We know
Yeah.
This is only the beginning for you.
Yeah, I hope so.
Thank you for tuning into the Hockey IQ podcast. We are Hockey's Arsenal, Greg Revac and Dan Dukart. Together, we've come together to create a platform and a community to expand on hockey intelligence, hockey IQ, whatever you want to call it. We're very passionate about seeing this game played smarter and better and continue to develop itself to the next level and staying on the cutting edge of things. So you can find us at Hockey's Arsenal on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. We're also at hockeysarsenal.com. From there, you can find some resources and some options to work with us. We're excited to continue this. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, follow, and share. You can also join up for our newsletter as well, where we're going to tackle anything Hockey IQ related. So we're excited to have everyone here and continue to build.